Hey, everybody. Welcome back to a new episode of Life, Love, and Existential Dread. My name is Bryan and Nathan. I'm a film composer in Los Angeles. And my co-host, an actor, writer, director, producer. There can be only one, the Highlander, Nathan Shelton. How you doing, Nathan?
I'm so good. I'm so good today. How you doing, Bryan?
Doing good. Glad to be here. Trying to stay cool with the heat going on here. It's scorching out here. And if there are screams, there are kids playing at the pool. So I apologize for that in advance. There are children trying to stay cool at the pool in my apartment complex. So I apologize
If there's
for that.
screams on my end, it's just the kids in my dungeon. So no.
Oh,
worries.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. They're right under my feet. No. Here in Chicago, it has been so nice. It's been in the mid to upper 60s, the mid 70s. Today it's 79, I believe, is going to be the high. It was 77, but there's a storm that came in or is kind of rolling in. So there's a nice breeze. I went on a nice long walk this morning. Oh,
are
gorgeous.
you kidding?
I have all my windows open. It's so weird. This is not normal for this time, but it's been really nice. Back home in Missouri, it's like a tropical nightmare. It's just balmy and yucky, sweaty. But here, it's beautiful. It's a great time to be. You should come visit. You just come to the Windy.
I want to come out to Windy City just for the weather, man.
Yeah,
we're
it's nice. I think it's supposed to be nice all week too.
Good. I will stay. I'll stay the week as long as the weather's good because it's supposed to be around 100 here for the next week or so.
That's what it was like back in Missouri.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah. It's enough of this already, man. Well, one thing I want to talk about and discuss is I was watching some of those shows on Netflix, the movies that made us shows.
Oh, yeah. We've talked about those before. We love those.
We talked those before and so many movies that defined who we are. I have no personality, so I would watch movies and memorize movies and try to be the characters in movies. And, so therefore, the movies that made us, the movies that made me.
And I speak almost exclusively in movie quotes. So
me too.
Yeah.
Me and my sister, we would memorize entire movies. Clue, the movie.
Oh my God, that is absolutely.
She and I had the whole thing memorized.
Yep.
She would be the women, I would be the men. We'd flip flop and mix and match and everything. But then we could also quote it straight through, so you could just do everybody. Yeah. And we drive our parents crazy on like car trips and stuff, me and her just doing that in the car. And my mom's like, shut up. What are you guys doing? What is that? Shut up. Driving her nuts. And my dad is laughing his ass off because he thought it was so funny. And it's making my mom mad, so it was just so damn funny just to do that.
Funny you mentioned that really quick. I just had mentioned I was back in Missouri and my folks came to visit me here in Chicago a little bit ago, a couple weeks back. They were just here for the weekend. They were out having a vacation, which they never get. And so, we all drove back. We took the kids and we drove back to Springfield for a little bit, Missouri, and then Harrisonville, where they live, which is just south of KC, where my dad is a pastor. My mom works for UMKC. And so we were out there, driving back that long, typically it's like an 8-hour trip, to Springfield from Chicago. And, my firstborn, Lena, is in the front seat and Lena's texting them what I'm saying, and they're texting me back. Mom is, I think dad is in the driving and my mom is in the passenger seat behind us with Finn in their car, and they're texting, and we're going back and forth for 25, 30 minutes, just with quotes from Big Trouble in Little China. Like everything possible. And it got to the point I won, by the way. I won this quote war. But Lena was like, at the 20-minute mark, Lena's like, Dad, can we stop doing this? Why are we doing this? And I'd just be like, you will come out no more. And Lena's like, oh, okay, you will come out, and it just kept going back and forth. And those movies, like back in that time period, 80s movies, just damn, it's like 70s and 80s. There was something about the dialogue that I can quote all of Clue, like you said, and I can do it for Big Trouble in Little China, Ghostbusters, all those movies. It's crazy.
And so, I was thinking about that today. I was like, man, movies really did make me. I mean, I am the amalgam of so many movies. And then I thought, well, what's my number one movie? And what I usually say is Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the reason I say that, and that was in 81. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is because the theme music stuck with me. 1981, what was I, 6, 7 years old? And I was terrified of the melting faces at the end.
Oh, yeah.
And my dad had to explain to me that, no, that's not real people. That's like plastic, movie prosthetics. Because I didn't understand. I was a little kid. Mm-hmm. But days after seeing that movie in the theater, I'm still whistling and humming the theme music. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I was still a little kid, but it was that memorable to me. And my dad's like, what do you do? What is that? What are you singing? What is that? I was like, no, it was in the movie we saw earlier, and it was like days ago, whatever. But I'm still whistling because it's such an incredibly catchy melody and everything.
Oh my God. Yeah. One of the best. I think it's arguably his best. I know everybody thinks Star Wars is probably his best, or Jaws. I think it's the Raiders theme. I have to say that.
Definitely. So catchy, so iconic. Everybody knows it. It's just one of the things. John Williams,
the movements in it. It's just, it's perfect.
And I love I love the story about John Williams wrote 2 themes. Is the first one, that's iconic one, but then like the B section of the main theme was also a separate theme that Spielberg said, well, can't you just use both and put them together somehow? And then that became the theme because he wrote 2 separate things. He's like, no, just put them all together, use everything. And I was like, that was Spielberg's genius on the music side of it for that movie as well. So I love thinking of that and knowing that, but having that memory of my dad explaining that to me, remembering the music days later and everything, I always say that's my favorite movie. But as a close second or a neck and neck tie is Back to the Future. And that was in 1985.
Right.
So I wanted to be Marty McFly. I played piano, but it really is not a cool instrument. Guitar is really much cooler. And so I wanted to be him and jump around and play guitar on the stage. Johnny Be Good and all that stuff, ride a skateboard. And I would tell you this, me and my friends, we would get hold on to the back of the ice cream truck in our neighborhood because it's so damn slow. It's like it goes like 5-10 miles an hour. We'd hang on to the back of the truck and do that thing, hang on to the back things. So I was like, man, that movie really made me. So I was like, well, Raiders, yes, but Back to the Future a little more so because I was like, man,
you were older,
I just want to do that.
When Back to the Future came out, because that was what, 84?
85 is 85. Back to the Future. So I'm 10 years old.
Yeah. And I'm 3.
You're 3. Okay.
I just stabbed her right in the back there.
Yes, I'm the old man on the show, everybody. I'm the old man. Nathan's the baby. He will always be. That's the way it is.
You're just a little baby. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you, though. Both of those movies also, I mean, I think anybody that grew up in the 80s, those movies had to have had just such a dramatic effect.
Incredible effect on my life, and just becoming who I am. Again, I was like, I want to emulate that character and just want to be Marty McFly no matter what. But then I was looking at how many movies influenced me in 1985 alone. It was unbelievable. I looked it up, how many movies were in 1985. What were the box office hits? Okay.
Right.
The Goonies, another monstrous influence upon me. The Goonies.
Of course.
Breakfast Club, even though I didn't really understand it at the time. Breakfast Club was in 85 as well.
Right.
Rocky IV, we already talked about on the previous episode. Rocky IV, major influence because me and my brother would fight a lot, so I wanted to be Rocky Balboa. And
right, and I've still not seen that one.
You got
I don't know. I'm just not into the Rocky movies. I will. I'll do it for you. You come and visit, and we'll watch the complete Rocky filmography.
Okay, we got a deal there.
And the novelizations of the books, or of the movies, we'll read those together out loud.
Yo, Adrian!
Before we go to sleep in sleeping bags. It'll be a week-long sleepover of Rocky.
Oh man, looking forward to it. I would be in heaven if we watch all those Rocky movies all in a row. That'd be so great. Rocky IV was another one. Clue was also in 1985. We were talking about that a second ago.
Yep.
And then, but also Chevy Chase movies. National Lampoon's European Vacation, Spies Like Us, and Fletch all came out in 85.
They all did? I did not know that. For some reason, I thought Fletch was younger or older than that, like it had come out earlier. But yeah.
Like 3 monster hit movies for him in '85, and it just kept going. Commando, I love Commando.
Commando's a great movie. Yeah,
Schwarzenegger's first. I was like, oh, again, like looking at Rocky movies, like, oh man, I want to be that buff and big and ripped to shreds when I get older. It's another one of those things. You look at that guy and see that as a kid. But some horror stuff in there. I don't know if you were a fan of this. I want to ask you about this. Was the Nightmare on Elm Street 2 was released in '85? I don't know if you're a fan of that series or what, but I noticed that was in '85 as well.
Yeah. Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is kind of infamous in the pantheon of all of those movies. I don't know if you know the story with that, but there's a documentary on that as well, on Nightmare on Elm Street 2 specifically, because there was a lot of themes in it that people thought were inherently gay or like not inherently, but that were there. And the lead actor, I think at the time, I can't remember, they talk about this in the documentary, and I don't know if he was outed by the movie or like I think he is a gay. He was a gay actor, but I don't know if he was open about that at the time. And the director, it also was the one that kind of broke the Freddy trope of like, because he actually is outside of the dreams in that movie. He's in the real world, and that just didn't make any sense. But there's a really good documentary on it. I can't remember the name of that, but you could check it out. I think it's on Shudder. It might even be on Amazon Prime. Really good documentary. I enjoyed it. But that movie, those movies, I knew about them. They definitely had such an impact on all of us as kids at that time, because everybody for Halloween, we were dressing up, kids my age, we were always dressing up like Freddy Krueger, Chucky, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees. All those guys were so big. I was more into the classic monsters. My dad and my mom would not let us watch Nightmare on Elm Street, so I didn't grow up with that. And my parents let me watch a lot of shit, right? Like I saw a lot of things that were very scary. I saw American Werewolf in London when I was 4. I had nightmares, but it made me want to be an actor and a special effects makeup artist, thriller in the making too. So, there's things that we saw, but for some reason, the slashery kind of stuff. And we saw the first Halloween movie too with my dad when we were very young, because he loves that movie, but he would make us leave during the booby scenes and stuff like that. But the Freddy Krueger movies, they're so, it's the teen, the slasher, there's a lot more sex in it and a lot more, and he thought that with the nightmare stuff, maybe it would be too scary. And I think at the time, my dad just didn't really like those movies, thought they were kind of like trashy horror. And my dad's a huge horror buff, right? But not into the slashery stuff as much. So I didn't grow up as influenced, but peripherally influenced by Freddy Krueger, right? So like I would have a folder that was like a Nightmare on Elm Street folder, or I'd get sticker packs with Freddy Krueger, or I would, get a Freddy glove or a mask or something like that. And all my friends, like we would play Freddy Krueger, at recess or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I was not a fan of those movies in the sense of I actually knew them. I didn't watch those movies until much, much later. I think I was either in high school or maybe even college when I actually saw all of them, went back and watched all of them. But I will tell you, my favorite is Freddy versus Jason. Aside from the first movie, out of both of those franchises, I love Freddy versus Jason. I think it's goofy. It's got everything you want in a horror movie, and it combines both of them so well. Is it a perfect movie? Hell no. But is it a lot of fun to watch? Hell yes. And I was working at a movie theater when it came out, so I still have all the swag from it, like shirts, and like they had those like wrestling lanyards from the movie that were, versus they were like, who's gonna win? It was like a big deal when that movie came out, the first cross franchise, those two icons. Yeah. But no, I do love the very first Nightmare on Elm Street, but I'm not, and Dream Warriors is pretty good, but didn't really get into those. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer to your question, but no. In 1985, definitely, I didn't really know much about Freddy Krueger.
Okay, because I saw that go by. I was like, well, maybe Nate, maybe you were influenced by that somehow, or you saw that, and terrified by it as a young kid, as a lot of things. And you mentioned Halloween a second ago. I remember seeing Halloween at a very young age. It came out in '78, the first one. Okay, and it wasn't when I came out because I was 3 years old in '78, but I remember seeing it as a very young child and was terrified of it.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
terrified. Like I couldn't sleep for like 2 or 3 days because
It's
of that
still
movie.
scary, I think. I think it's the best out of all those, all the slasher. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pre-slasher. It's not really a slasher movie, and yet it
Yeah.
is, but it's classier than what became slashers. Like it's
Yeah.
classier than any Friday the 13th movie, you know,
Yeah.
and Freddy's kind of endearing because it's not just a slasher movie. I mean, he's like a weird, funny, you know, goofy kind of villain. So
Yeah.
it's a very different movie. But yeah, Halloween, that first one. Ooh, so
Ooh,
scary. I
very.
love that. I watch it every Halloween. I love
Okay.
that movie.
Yeah. But I remember watching it recently again, and still, you know, I'm 47. I'm still getting like memories of it as a kid.
Right.
It still affects me all those years later. So
Yeah.
I shouldn't have watched it as a young child, but somehow or another I did. And I'm still
Yeah.
terrified to this day. So, but anyway, iconic movies of those times and how they affect you. And again, the whole topic of what I want to talk about today. But then another movie that greatly influenced me in 1985 was Amadeus. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So the story of Mozart and Salieri, which is not true. It's totally made up for the movie and everything. They were really kind of colleagues, and Mozart actually kind of was jealous of Salieri, apparently, not the other way around, as the movie depicts. So,
well, and it's based off of a Broadway production.
Yeah.
A stage play.
Yeah. Whereas, you know, it's just Salieri like doing a confessional thing to the priest or whatever, you know, and thing like that. But then, you know, obviously it was a ginormous hit, you know, and everything, but still hugely influential to me. I was like, well, that's Mozart and everything. And then it's like, be that good. And my brother could do the thing where there's a scene in that movie where they flip him upside down and he plays the piano like backwards.
Yes.
My brother could do that because he's a pretty good piano player too.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So again,
have you ever practiced that? Did you ever do that?
I never did it. I was like, I don't think I could do that. You know, like you got to think backwards on your hands and everything. And he was famous. Mozart was famous for that. He could think forwards and backwards on music. Didn't matter. You know, everything was all squared in his head because he was such a genius
prodigy.
composer.
Yeah. I loved that movie too when I was young, man. I did. Yeah. I used to do that laugh laugh that Tom Hulce does, and that's so good. It's so good. And the makeup in that movie was done by the grandfather of modern makeup, Dick Smith, and he won an Academy Award for that.
Yeah.
You know, the old age makeup on Salieri, that used to scare the crap out of me when he slits his throat in that movie. Yeah. I was always like, my dad had a book of cult films and like iconic films, and there's a close-up picture of that where he's, you know, got the slit throat. I was always like, oh my God. So scary.
Yeah. And the makeup and everything. And the fact that he, you know, he's trying to kill himself and everything. So it's
very Abraham. So good in that movie.
So good. Plays the king of mediocrity, you know, so well, even though the real guy really wasn't in real life. So,
right.
But another hugely influential movie. So anyway, I was thinking about that today, you know, it's like 1980, but that's only in 1985.
Right.
Like so many iconic films in 85, you know, and the Clue thing and everything. And another movie that me and my sister memorized that was hugely influential, and we thought, and we have it almost word for word, and we recently redid it last time, or when I visited her back in December, was Spaceballs. And
was that 85? Yeah, that was 85.
Or I'm sorry, 87. Spaceballs 87. I looked it up. I looked it up.
Yeah. Okay.
But she and I can do Spaceballs, and
completely.
So we found it like on YouTube with ads or something like that. And then we're sitting there, and then her son jumps into the room and starts sitting down and listening to us, you know, doing the whole thing. And he is wildly entertained by
I'm sure
his mother and his uncle, you know, quoting this thing word for word. You know,
how many assholes we got on this thing?
Yo! What's the matter, Colonel Sanders? Chicken? You know, I mean, just so many great lines.
Mr. Coffee.
Yeah.
That's Mr. Radar. Yeah, that's another very highly quotable movie. I mean, you know, all those Mel Brooks movies, the earlier ones definitely have just perfect quotes. But man, yeah, totally.
That was another one that made me and my sister, and we would just quote that thing over and over again, and still could do it, you know, all these years later. Could do most of it. I was actually fumbling on a few words, like a few little words here, and I'm like, oh yes, it's the or an or you know, or I miss things like that, you know. And I see your
Schwartz is as big as mine.
Yeah.
You're talking about just the 80s being this decade of just amazing powerhouse movies that still hold true today, not just for fans, but just in the pantheon of great films. And it's across all genres, right? It's action movies, drama movies, period pieces, historic pieces, kids, family friendly movie, everything. Horror movies take the cake, I believe, because almost everything that was coming out in the 80s was gold. And we're not just talking American film, we're talking worldwide. If you go back, the best horror movie documentaries that are out there, in my opinion, are the In Search of Darkness documentaries that are on Shudder. Those are both, there's two of them. They're both 4-hour documentaries on movies from the 80s, and they both cover different movies.
Wow.
That are in that, and they're making a third one that is going to be the final one, and that also, I believe, will be in the 80s. Now, maybe, hopefully, God, that same production company will move on and do the 90s as well, or maybe the 70s, but I don't know. It's not as rich of a decade. 90s are pretty rich, but not as, with what was coming out, because in the 80s, that was the birth of modern special effects. So you had big budget and small budget movies that were doing crazy things, and experimental directors that were able to get their stuff to the direct to video markets, things like that. So those documentaries, I cannot recommend them enough. I go back and watch them over and over again, because the interviews that they have with actors and directors from the time, there's a lot of insight into what was going on in our country and other countries at that time. The second one really goes into a lot of world cinema in the 80s, talking about like Italian horror and its influence on American horror. Oh my God, cannot recommend that documentary series enough, man. If you love 80s movies and you love 80s horror specifically, you've got to check that out. In Search of Darkness. All right. Yeah.
In Search of Darkness. Definitely. Yeah. Well, we'll do.
Yeah. Worth the Shudder subscription alone. They have great content on there, but that's gold.
Excellent. Oh man. Well, that's I don't know. That's what was on my mind. I was just like, man, so many movies contributed to who I am today, and yes, I'm just quoting all those things, but also trying to, like I said, trying to be Marty McFly, right, or trying to be, Indiana Jones or whatever, I was like, man, I hugely influential, and right. I truly think in my personality today, not that I'm as cool as Marty McFly or ever was or ever will be.
You might be as cool as Doc Brown.
Maybe Doc Brown. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know how they found me, but they found me. I think, Bryan, that that those movies that made us, it's interesting culturally, because those movies didn't just make us, right? There's a whole generation of people, including people outside of the industry, that didn't want to get into filmmaking, but still are so heavily influenced by those that they're continuously shown in midnight showings across the country. There's movies from the 80s that have never really left being shown theatrically, because they're so popular, and they continue to be. And I think we see that in our culture today, especially over the last 10 years. You've really seen this weird 80s nouveau kind of like idealism that's popping up. And I think Stranger Things was the fact that Stephen King's constantly getting brought, because Stephen King's heyday was the 80s, right? That's when he really blew up as the megastar that he is. And you go back and Stranger Things, those kind of movies that are coming back and getting revivals. And, you have all these other movies that have these 80s, that are either set in the 80s or have this kind of 80s feel to them, with kids being more free and independent at a younger age, being able to go out with their friends and do things which we don't have as much anymore because of the way the world is different. But that kind of, Stranger Things is so huge, and their 80s nostalgia is at the heart of that, right? And it's not even half the crap in there is not even real 80s nostalgia. It's almost like a Cliff Notes version or 80s for Dummies version. It's like, it's not really lived in 80s. There's some movies that really captured the 80s, I think, much stronger, but you see that a lot in genre films, that it's still being done, and I think we're getting ready to start making the jump into 90s. And the movies that people love from the 90s are starting to get their remakes. They're starting to get people idealizing those. So I wonder how often this cycle goes back through. And obviously it goes to my kids, because my kids enjoy Stranger Things. My kids enjoy things. The 80s to them is like what the 60s, I guess, were to us, right? And the 60s and the early 70s were to us kind of like being this, I'm not near that generation, but I appreciate all this great stuff coming out of it, like the music or the films and stuff like that. And so it's like a bygone recent generation. And just to watch my kids, who are both teenagers, embrace 80s things. They love all the movies that we're talking about. They used to watch Clue all the time, and Clue's a great road trip movie because you can just like zoom into it, right?
Yeah.
And I showed that to Alma and my wife, who is Spanish native speaker, but English is a second language. But when you have jokes that are in English firing at rapid fire, even if we watched it in Spanish, and things don't jokes, I think, in whatever language you're going in, if it's not in the native language and you don't speak that language and you don't understand culturally that particular culture, because so much of humor is cultural references, plays on words, different things that, it's for specific audiences. I don't think all comedy transcends that and goes out past that. Yeah. So all of us here in America, and probably in England, Europe, would love Clue. But when you get outside of that and you have these, Latin cultures or, Middle Eastern cultures or African cultures or, even South America, it's like you just get into all these different places. They might not understand culturally where a lot of those jokes are, the plays on words, definitely in the translation with the dialogue, but even references to things and societal statures and understanding, specifically with Clue, the nature of that time period and communism and who J. Edgar Hoover is, because he's on everybody else's phone. Why wouldn't he be on mine? It's like you miss those jokes if you're not if you're not part of this, you don't know what it was like. We weren't living in the 50s during McCarthyism and all of that horror show of the Red Scare and everything, but we understand it because we are products of people who did live it, just like everything we were living in the 80s and the Cold War and still the threat of nuclear annihilation that was present everywhere at the time trickles down through our kids, and everything like that. So even though they didn't live it, they understand it because of the media at the time. And it's a cultural like passing down that we don't even, I don't think, mean to do. You don't even have to discuss it. It's just inherent in that media. So I don't know. There was a lot of shit going on in the 80s, but it birthed a hell of a ton of great movies. Great movies. And books and everything. I mean, I love the 80s. I like the music from the 80s. My kids love music from the 80s. Like most of Lena's, their music playlist is just filled with 80s stuff. A lot of Oingo Boingo. Hey. A lot of great 80s bands and a lot of 90s stuff, and of course modern stuff too. But it's great. But it's weird to think it was so long ago.
Yeah. And so long ago, but still hugely influential in these days. Like you mentioned, Stranger Things, there is an episode in season 3 where they use the score to Back to the Future. And I thought it was used extremely well when they're running around the movie theater or whatever. Yep. So it's just, nostalgia, but also a new twist on it, particularly with that show. Right. But it just got me thinking today. I was like, man, how many movies influenced me, made me who I am, and how many of them were just in that one year? 85.
Right, 85, yeah.
And another one I want to mention, and I'm sure we could go off on this one too, but another one was Weird Science Another John Hughes
Speaking
movie.
of Oingo Boingo, absolutely.
Well, you said Oingo Boingo, and I was like, oh, I forgot about Weird Science '85.
Yeah.
So I wanted to mention that one, but that was another one I thought it was really cool. So or hugely influential. I wasn't a very popular kid or anything, so I was like, oh, maybe I'm kind of like these guys, whatever.
Looking at some other movies that came out in '85, dude. Yeah. Fright Night.
Oh, okay.
That movie, you might see. I'm a horror buff. I don't know if
I don't know that one.
Fright
I heard
Night,
of it. Heard of it. Don't know it. No.
Fright Night was my brother and I. Oh my God. I grew up wanting to be Peter Vincent, the vampire killer. And I watched that movie over and over and over again. That was 85. I forgot that was 85. Cat's Eye, Stephen King. That's an anthology movie that scared the crap out of me. And I watched it all the time. I did not know that came out in 85 too, but that's an early Drew Barrymore. Better Off Dead, a Savage Steve Holland movie. One of my favorite all-time John Cusack movies. It's that, he did those two with Savage Steve Holland, that and One Crazy Summer in the 80s. And that one. And I think that Better Off Dead is actually better than One Crazy Summer, but people would argue with me. We also have Day of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead. Those both came out in 85. So that's amazing. Freaking Legend came out in 85.
Oh,
with the Tangerine Dream soundtrack. And you've got Tim Curry also playing Lord Darkness and Tom Cruise and Billy Barty and just this fantasy epic. Oh, and my man Bob Picardo playing playing Meg Mucklebones, the witch, which I did get to talk to him about. And he almost got his head chopped off in real life because of this metal plate of the thing that shot him up out of the water. It was pretty dangerous.
Oh my God, dude.
Because his suit got waterlogged and he wasn't coming up fast enough. And it was like, it was messed up, but he was okay. But it was,
Jeez.
Yeah. But anyway, and then looking at freaking Michael J. Fox, Teen Wolf came out that same year.
Yeah, Teen Wolf.
And that was a huge movie for kids. I think it was mainly kids that liked it. I when you watch it and you go back and you watch it as an adult, you're kind of like, this really isn't a great movie. But as a kid, he's up on top of the thing and, playing guitar, and it's a werewolf movie, but it's not scary at all. Right. So that's amazing. Teen Wolf came out that year. Life Force came out that year. Which is the famous vampire booby movie, the space vampires. And actually, I never saw that. I've always heard of Life Force, right? Because it's a cult classic. I just watched it for the first time probably 5 years ago. And I loved it. I still think that that's a great movie. The Explorers came out that year.
Explorers? Is that year too?
Yes.
Whoa. Another wildly influential movie.
And gosh, you've got After Hours, which was a very adult movie, right? But After Hours came out. My parents loved that movie. They talked about it constantly. And I kept going, God, I want to watch After Hours. I want to watch this movie. And I watched it later and I'm like, meh. But they loved it, in 85. They loved it. And then these are some of my other top favorites from this year. You got Enemy Mine with Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. I watched that over and over again.
Me too.
Freaking Stephen King's Silver Bullet, the movie version of Cycle of the Werewolf with crazy, what's his name? The who plays the uncle in that? Well, Corey Haim is the main kid in it, but his uncle's played by Gary Busey.
Oh,
like crazy ass Gary Busey, and he's like improvising his dialogue, and you could tell. Oh man, that movie's great. Silver Bullet, Brazil by Terry Gilliam, which is Brazil is like one of Terry Gilliam's greatest movies. Terry Gilliam, who did like Time Bandits and God, I don't know, so many movies. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which I believe was 89, but Brazil, Jonathan Pryce stars in it, and it is epic. I mean, this year was insane.
That's what I'm saying.
With a View, St. Elmo's Fire, freaking Real Genius.
Real Genius, yeah, another
Real
Val
Genius,
Kilmer.
which I watched over and over again. Like you said, Commando, Witness with Harrison Ford came out that same year. The Color Purple.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about Fletch, but I mean, God, what an amazing year. Lady Hawk came out that year. Lady Hawk with Matthew Broderick, Rutger Hauer, Michelle Pfeiffer. Do you know that movie where they
again, like heard of it, but I don't know it. Yeah.
Oh, it takes place in like the medieval times, and every time at sunset they're cursed, and so he turns into a wolf and she turns into a hawk right at sunset, so they can never be human together. And Matthew Broderick's this young thief trying to help them. and against the evil church. Return to Oz, also Silverado, one of the greatest. One of the greatest westerns I've seen. I'm not a big western fan, but I love Silverado and a good score. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Oh, dude. Beyond the Thunderdome, and I remember Bruce Broughton was the score on Silverado. But also Mad Max Thunderdome, love that one too. I mean, 85 jam packed with
Jewel of the Nile, Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
I forgot about Pee-wee. I was gonna say Pee-wee. I forgot about Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Jeez, I'm just looking at this right now, so I can, I'm remembering all this. But that year, wow. Yeah.
It was, and all those ones I forgot about, but it's so many just in 85 alone. So
Lucio Fulci, oh my God, Demons, Transylvania 65000, lots of great horror movies that I just loved coming out. House came out that year too. House.
All right.
I love that movie. Dude, 85. That was a good year. Maybe I'll do a 85 retrospective this year for Halloween and just go back through. The Bride with Sting. That came out that year. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Was a very good year.
Yeah.
85, man. I was 3, you were like 6 or 7.
I was 10. Yeah, but
10.
Yeah, but still very young. Didn't know what was happening, but wildly influenced by so many of those movies. Just
totally.
Just got me thinking about that today. I'm like, man. So it was just one after another,
Absolutely.
The whole year.
Well, now I'm itching to watch some 80s fun movies, not just horror too. Like, geez, just
big
some great
movies. Huge movies.
Great movies that came out in that time period that definitely need to get revisited. And I would definitely be going back and watching some of these. Well, thanks for the heads up on these and for this nice little trip down memory lane for both of us. It's fun. It's good.
I love it. I want to talk to you about it too, but you wanted the horror side of it, but I kind of more the pop. I have more the big movies. I'm more to that side of it, But I want to ask you about Nightmare on Elm Street, but of course, I knew you'd have that response too. It was like, man, you knew about it. It was wildly influenced, but then all these other ones pop up in this last bit. So
right, Nightmare on Elm Street. Obviously it was huge in the 80s. It just, for me, I didn't get into it, because my parents just didn't let me watch it. So I knew of it. I respected it for what it was, but I didn't. And everybody knew who Freddy Krueger was on like commercials for household products at the time. I mean, Robert Englund was huge. And but I just never got really into those movies until much later. But
all right. Well, we only got a couple minutes left, but I know we could keep yapping on for forever. But I want to
movies. Come on,
about 80s movies, even outside of 85. But I swear you could talk for 3 more hours about 85. Even Back to the Future alone, I could keep going off on that. But,
right.
A minute or so left here. So
awesome. Well, it was great talking to you as always, my friend. And those of you listening out there, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. Maybe you got excited a little bit about going back to all the way back to 1985 to listen and to watch movies from that decade. Just some amazing contributions to pop culture, not only here in America but across the world in the 80s, not just 85. And if you would like, get a hold of us. Be a part of the conversation. Hit us up on social media. Hit us up on our Instas, on our Twitters, on our Facebooks, and on our emails. We would love to hear from you. We would love to chat. We might have some guests coming on the show here soon. We've got some good friends working in the industry that have unique perspectives and also deal with life, love, and existential dread, as we all do. So, but thanks for joining us today, Bryan. Dude, as always, love chatting. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, man. I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Bye, everybody. Thanks.